morning, everyone. I am here to show you some examples of how we can put together our data for our internal assessment, including doing averages and standard deviation. And at the very end, I'll show you how to use the count if function, although I'm not sure how many of you will need to use that, maybe a couple. So first thing I want to start out with is hopefully on my screen, you are seeing that I have this student data. I can probably make my screen a little bit bigger so it's easier for y'all to see. And something that's important to think about, especially for many of you who are doing human physiology experiments, is these are test scores. These are your test scores, some of your test scores, from all of the tests we've taken in IB Biology 2 this year. But you'll notice that you don't know whose test scores these are because I have given numbers to individual students. They're arbitrary numbers so that there's no way for you to know who is who in this data. And it's really important to maintain confidentiality and do this for any of your human physiology experiments. You'll notice here that I have the test scores and I tell you what test number it is. And I had this realization, I thought about fixing it before the video, but I thought it was important to show that we can all improve and we all make mistakes. I didn't include the units in this. So somebody reading this would have no idea what these numbers mean. And so I actually need to go in and give this a label, right? This is test number 1. It's out of 7. And that's important for somebody to know when they look at these scores, because if they're assuming it's out of 10 or if they're assuming it's out of 100, that gives vastly different meaning and information to whoever is looking at my data. Which is also something really important for you all to think about when you go through your data, is who is looking at this? Do they understand what they're seeing? So this is just my raw data. I haven't done anything to it yet. I can, if I want to make this look all fancy, right? I can select all of this and there is this box up here. Usually you're going to see this box. It's going to look like it has no borders. It's a whole bunch of dotted lines. But you can use it to make borders around different parts of your data table. So I've just done some light borders around everything. You can also add a thicker outside border, which really frames your data table, makes it look really nice. So that's just kind of some basic formatting. I'm going to go to the next screen where I have copied the data, although I'm actually going to go over and copy my new labels that are here. So I'm going to put these back in so I have labeled things appropriately. And going through here, you can see that I have different values. So this is the exact same data, but now I want to find the average of these scores. And you'll notice I have average written in 2 places here. So this is actually my average test score by student, right? I'm doing the average score for student 23, student 28. There are a couple of ways you can do this. So the way we do formulas is you could manually do this if you would like to. It's not what I recommend, but you can do formulas on Excel where you hit the equal sign and you can type the formula. The one thing to remember is that Excel does not autocomplete. So if I type AVG and hit enter, it's just going to give me these hash marks because it's like, that's not a real formula. So you do have to either go in and type the whole word, like average, or if it pops up for you, you know you want the average, you can double click on this and it will select it for you. So you can double click as you start to type and then select your data. Or the other option that you can do is you can hit equals, AVARAGE, I can spell, and then you can hit parentheses and you're going to get the same thing, right? Dragging it across, you close parentheses and it'll do the average for you. So equals AVERAGE, drag it across. This is going to start to feel really tedious. Many of you have lots of data, which is awesome. So something you can do is Excel is smart. And if you see my cursor is currently kind of this white cross, I can turn it into this black X and grab the bottom green corner. And I do have to be already selected in one of these cells that has an average. It's only going to work in whatever cell you have selected. I can grab this corner and I can drag it the whole way down my average area. This whole average is going to take the average for all of these individuals without me having to type in equals average every single time. You can always go and check and be like, am I sure that this is what it did? And you can go in and click on the formula and click on your data, and it'll actually tell you where you took the average from. So you can always verify that that worked for you. That can be that's how you do an average. The other thing that you are probably going to want to do is something called standard deviation. Hopefully you've covered some of this in math class, but just briefly, your standard deviation just tells you how spread out your data is. So if your data is really, really spread out, it means that it's kind of inconsistent. It's not as reliable. There's a lot of deviation. There's a lot of differences between the different samples, and that's okay. Whereas if you have a small standard deviation, it means that it's more reliable, that it's closer, all the numbers are closer together. So just like we did before, we can do equals, and standard deviation is STDEV. And I can type that in and come across and just fill it out just like before. So again, it's equals STDEV, the parentheses, drag it over, close parentheses, right? And just like we did for our average, we can drag this all the way down. So just briefly talking about standard deviation, a couple of things to notice. So student 23 and student 21 here have the same standard deviation. They have the most similar scores against all of their tests compared to others. We can also see that student 3 and student 83 have the widest range in the scores that they've received on the test. So that's just how we can use some standard deviation. Other options that I have here is I can take an average of the scores overall for the test. So this is actually something I do for all of your tests to see how I'm doing as a teacher. So this is the average, I guess it's the class average test. And you'll see that this is now hanging over and it's hanging out here, and I don't really want it. I want to be able to put my averages in here and make sure I still have this. So I can go up here and use this button called wrap text. And I hit this button, and what it does is it actually wraps the text so it stays in this box. So I'll drop this down and it maintains it all here, and I just create a bigger box for it. So nothing has changed. We're still just doing equals average, and then I'm selecting all of the data in a column instead of all of the data in a row. Again, if I select this and I bring that little X cursor down, I can drag it all the way across to get my averages per test. So that is still a possibility. The last thing I am going to show you is a function called COUNTIF. This might be helpful for human physiology if you're comparing things. It might not be super relevant for many of you, but I can do something called COUNTIF. So equals COUNTIF. And what this does is it counts the number of a certain thing in a cell. So COUNTIF, I can select the range, right? So I'm looking at all my test scores. And here, I'm going to hit a comma because I've chosen my range. And now I'm going to put in parentheses whatever I'm looking for, right? So in this case, I'm looking for how many people got a 1 on our first IB test. And I hit return, and it shows me nobody got a 1. If I do it here with the 3s, I also know there's no 2s. So I'm going to go to 3 real fast just to show how this would work, right? And I would just do the same thing. I'd select my range and go over. This one is going to be one that you're not going to be able to drag as well, because if you drag it, I can actually show you, right? If I drag this down, so remember originally I was looking at this data and I was counting the 1s. If I now go look at this, it's actually shifted all of my data down one spot. I can go in manually and change it. I can also drag this box when it shows me what data box I have and change it that way. And it's also maintained that it's still counting 1. So I have to go in and change it to a 2. Some people feel like that's easier. I am more of a person who I think I type decently quickly. So I'm just going to go back through and select my data and redo it for all of the different components. So that's just kind of some different options you can use. Those are your basics, how to make the chart nice. Remember, we did that before. Up here, We can select all our borders and add in a thick outside border, make our chart look nice as we go to put it into our internal assessment. We talked about how to find the average and the standard deviation. And if you need any help, don't hesitate to reach out.